Good afternoon and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment hearings for Suburban Panel 2. We are a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances to the zoning requirements and consents to sever land. Our hearings are now in person at Ben Franklin Place, 101 Centerpoint Drive. We are also enable remote participation by video conferencing for the registered speakers. We are live streaming on YouTube and the video will be archived and available for future public viewing. My name is Fabian Poulin. I'll be chairing today's hearings and you can address me by my name or as chair. And with me are my fellow panel members, Jay Baltz, George Barrett, Heather McLean, and Julianne Wright. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with agenda items in a different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear any oral submissions relating to the applications. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also had to confirm in writing that they did so, or they'll need to swear or affirm an oath today that they've fulfilled the sign posting requirements. Otherwise, we may have to adjourn or postpone the hearing. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We will then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak, and we may also have questions for them. Finally, the applicant, who has the burden of proof, will have an opportunity to make final comments and reply. Please address your comments to me as the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. In either case, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we'll be following today? No questions? We have several applications to hear today, but first we need to deal with some preliminary and procedural matters. Are there any declaration of interest from any panel members? There are no declarations of interest. We don't have any minutes to confirm. We do have one, I believe, adjournment request. That adjournment request has to do with 2475 Regina. Is P. Oosterhout here?
It's Philip Osterhout, last name O-S-T-E-R-H-O-U-T. I'm counsel for the
Thank you very much. And I understand that you'd like to have this application adjourned until November the 19th, which is the next available hearing.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that would be adequate time.
Okay. Does planning have any objections?
But we have no objections to this. We've been in conversation for the last 2 days, and I understand a lot of discussions are not with our adjacent team, so hopefully we'll have something.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel if they would adjourn this application to November 19. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned till November the 19th, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll move on to those applications that are on the unopposed applications list. And in order for them to qualify, there has to be no objections or concerns from the parties, that is the applicant, city, or the public. No amendments are required. No registered speakers. Sign posting declaration has been received. The applicant or the agent has confirmed that they agree with all requested conditions, if there are any, and no questions from panelists. The items that we have on the unopposed list is item number 3, having to do with 3809 Borrisokane. I'd like to ask the panel if they approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That application has been approved. Next application is 2262 Braeside. All those in favor of this application, please raise your hands. That application has also been approved. Item number 8 is having to do with 1339 Mory. That application, I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to approve that application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That application is also approved. And the next and last application on this unopposed applications list is 2180 Mer-Bleue. And I'd like to ask the panel if they approve this application. Approved. All those in favor? That application is also approved. So now we will move on to the applications in order to be heard. And the first application to be heard is having to do with 858 Wingate. And I'm looking for Mr. or R. Pacheco.
That's me.
Oh, come on up. So please state your name, sir, and your address.
My name is Renzo Chiquetto, 1454 Cheddar Avenue. I'll spell the last name.
Oh, all right, thank you. Last name is Cecchetto.
Thank you, sir. I note for the panel that the variances, some are being removed. That is variance C is being removed. Are you in agreement with that, sir?
Yes,
And variance E is also being removed.
agreed.
Okay, I can read them out if
That's fine.
okay. And then variance A is being modified to the following: to permit a reduced setback for a detached garage for eaves. Instead of 1.18 meters, it's now 0.3 meters from the interior side lot line. Any agreement with that, sir?
In agreement, yes.
Perfect. Okay, so to that end, could you give us a brief description then of your application?
Sure, it's a relatively simple proposal despite the various variances that are affected. The applicant is seeking to build a single detached garage in the rear yard and is seeking to have it closer to the side property line and rear property line in order to ensure that it's possible to drive a car along the side and then into the front garage opening.
Okay. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for the applicant. Mr. Barrett? Okay. Ms. Wright?
No, I don't.
Okay, Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears that there's a utility easement or an easement in the rear yard of about 1.22 meters in width. It looked like it was on the reference or on the survey plan. So I just would caution you that you may need to get permission to build on that easement if it is in existence.
I am aware that the survey did reveal an unknown easement in advance of the application and agree that you are correct. That will need to be resolved in advance of obtaining the permit.
You don't feel that it will affect your variances at all?
It will alleviate them, if anything.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Baltz?
So I guess a quick question. There were 2 letters of no concern or support from your neighbors, and one which was concerned about drainage. There's a downspout that I think will be 3 feet from the lot line and 3 feet from the garage. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah. And can you confirm that, well, 2 things, I guess, that the slope will be away from the lot line and that water will be contained on your property, and that there's a condition on this approval that stormwater be contained on the property?
the applicant has been ambitious enough to already get a grading plan for the property and for the proposal. So they're doing their best to alleviate any of those sorts of runoff issues. And the gradings, although the rear yard applicant is rightfully concerned, there will be no change in the quantity of runoff or unless some very sufficient management were imposed, no change in the direction of the runoff either. So in other words, tomorrow will be no different than today. I don't know if that
I
was.
guess the concern would be if the roof is directing all of the water, which now hits the ground, to that point near the lot line, and that it ends up going across the lot line would be a concern.
Sure, and the only way to alleviate that is to manage everything to the street, which, given the grading of the property, would require some considerable changing to the grades, to the driveway, to the current water management, meaning if nothing is done after the garage is done, is built, there'll be no change in the quantity or the direction of the current situation. Yes, it'll be managed differently. It'll come off the garage and onto the ground versus simply onto the ground, but otherwise there will be no change in the future than there is today.
Okay, I'll have a similar question for planning, I think.
Absolutely. Okay. Now I'd like to move on to our city's planning department. Ms. Einkaran. I hope I said that right. You have any comments for this applicants?
Staff have no concerns on the proposed variances, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. All right, so we'll move to the panel. Mr. Baltz, would you like to ask some questions?
So basically, is there a condition being imposed on this approval that requires stormwater to be contained on the site?
Conditions are generally not imposed on minor variance applications, but drainage is something that would be also looked at during the building permit stage. And if any concerns to arise at that point, it can be taken care at that stage.
Okay, so, but you are confident that stormwater will be contained on this site and that there will not be an increase going over to the neighbor. The neighbor did provide evidence that they are already getting flooded. Was in the letter sent with pictures of what happens in the spring. No evidence that's coming from this property across the line, but they are already having water ponding, and we would not want that to increase. So building permit will take care of that. Yes. Okay.
Okay, no. Ms. McLean? No. Ms. Reddick? No. Mr. Barrett? No, no questions. Okay. Now we look to the public and see if there are any members of the public like to make some comments on this application. Do we have anybody in house? Online? No one online? Okay, then the last word would be up to you, sir.
All right, thank you to the committee members. I leave it at your discretion in regards to the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask the panel if they would like to reserve this decision. All those in favor of reserving, please raise your hands. Your application will be reserved. We'll give you our answer or the result of this application within 10 days.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now moving on to application number 2. This application has to do with 415 West Hunt Club Road, and is Jasmine Paolini here?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I think we understand very well the application here, and it was going to make it to unopposed, but because we're making a change to the variances, we have to make this presentation. So anyway, could you please just highlight what we need to do here? I think we have to delete a particular variance.
Yes, that's right. So the variance that we're looking to eliminate is variance D, which is the landscaped area for a parking lot. And that's due to a change in interpretation, or an interpretation we received from the zoning interpretations department as to how that's calculated.
Okay, and does the planning department, Penelope Horn, do you agree with this?
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect. Does the panel have any questions for the applicant, Mr. Baltz?
address it to planning? Or,
Sure.
well, to either. So I'm interested in. So this is designated in the official plan apparently as a scenic entryway. So I'm wondering how what is being planned there conforms to the official plan. I guess the applicant should go first, but I'd also like to hear from planning.
So the policies of the scenic entryway are being addressed through bringing the building closer to the street, eliminating the parking lot that's currently between the building and the street, and creating a more thoughtfully designed facade. So that would include an improved visitor entrance coming from the existing sidewalk that's in the mid-block section of that facade, and improving the employee amenity space that's also in the southeastern corner. All of these policies and our responses to them are also being dealt with through the concurrent site plan control application.
And trees are need.
So for the trees, there's a few existing between the parking lot that we're proposing to remove, which is the proposed location for the addition. The trees that would conflict with the proposed building are proposed to be removed, and we are replacing those trees with appropriate species. I think there's 13 small trees in front of the addition, and we're proposing 3 additional large trees to the west of the addition between the parking and the street.
And I guess from Ms. Horn, the same comments, questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baltz. So essentially, the scenic, so in terms of the variances requested, such as the glazing, those we planning staff feel would not interfere with the policies found in the scenic routes, because they're not really related to the variances at hand, especially now that no variance is required for the landscaped buffer. For the landscaping in the parking lot area.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. McLean, any questions? No? Ms. Wright? No. Mr. Barrett? No? Okay. I'd like to now do you want to ask some questions of the planning department? No? Do you want to ask any questions? No? Okay. I'll give you a last shot because there isn't any questions from the panel to the planning.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the 3 lasting variances were discussed in detail through the site plan application and with Penelope kind of early on in our application process. And I just like to thank Forestry and Planning for their cooperation in dealing with the changing in interpretations. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask now the panel if they would like to reserve this decision. All those in favor, please raise your hands. This decision is reserved and we'll let you know in about 10 days.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now on to item number 4. This item have to do with number 9 Granton Avenue. Sorry.
That's right. I thought there was one between these 2.
Okay. So can you give us a brief description of your application today?
So 9 Granton Avenue is a reciprocal severance and minor variance application. We're proposing 1 detached dwelling with 2 ADUs per lot. The zoning of the property is R1FF with an exception clause 632. And that's an important exception clause just because it does impact the lot area variance that we're requesting. But basically the exception clause allows us to include a strip of 1.6 meters in depth along the rear property line to be included in things like lot area, lot coverage, and rear yard requirements. And so we are requesting lot area variances for both properties and lot width variances for both properties. The lot area difference, both lots are similar proposed areas at 469.13 and 469.36, down from 600. And the lot width variances, both lots will be identical at 15.36, down from 19 meters. And there is one condition that I'd like to speak to, but can leave that to the end if that's appropriate.
Sure. Well, I was going to ask you if you know of all these conditions and do you agree with all of them?
So we have reviewed the full list of conditions proposed in the planning report. The only condition that I just have some questions for clarity, is condition 11, which has to do with securities for the retained tree.
The tree planting plan. Okay, do we have someone from the forestry department online?
Yes, I am here.
Ms. Young, could you answer, or maybe Ms. Paulini can ask the question she's concerned about to you, and maybe we can have an answer to that?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a condition, I understand it's specifically for tree number 1 in the front yard, which is proposed to be retained. And I just wanted to know, just because it seems like this is a new type of condition, like we've seen tree planting plans be made a condition, but to have a development agreement or letter of undertaking seems to be new. And my question is regarding the timeline, being the 2 years following the issuance of an occupancy permit. And I was wondering if that's 2 years from the date of the decision or 2 years after the occupancy permit is obtained post, 2 years for the severance.
Ms. Young?
Okay, thank you for the question. So to explain this one, it is a standard condition that we put in place for any severance that proposes work within the critical root zone of a city tree. And this one does. It looks like the driveway and services will be somewhat within the critical root zone. So this is just to ensure that the tree is protected through construction. And in terms of the timing, it is tied to the occupancy permit after development, just to make sure the tree survives the 2 years following construction, because often trees take some time to decline if damage is done. So it's to capture that. And then just at the end, you would need to submit a plan from arborist confirming that the tree is in good condition or the same condition that it's in now. And then we can release those securities back. Does that explain it for you?
Yeah, that explains the timeline. But I did have a slight, not concern, but I know that fines can be imposed for trees that are removed or damaged during construction without a permit. And I'm wondering is that not a suitable enough mechanism for the tree to ensure the tree retention as opposed to a development agreement, which is what I believe is being asked here.
This one, it allows for either a development agreement or an LOU, so a letter of undertaking. Slightly different processes, and we can talk about those online or offline, sorry, depending on which way you want to go. But yeah, we do find that taking securities is a better way to ensure that people actually put up the tree protection and maintain it through the full construction period. There is certainly always still the risk of fines through the bylaw, but we do find that this is a better approach.
Sorry, and just one more follow-up. Does that mean it's a development agreement? It's an and/or situation? It's not both the development agreement and the letter of undertaking?
No, it's one or the other.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Young, which one are we going to be dealing with putting in this tree planting plan? Because it'd be important, I think, for us as the panel to ask Ms. Paolini if she is going to agree with whatever a letter of undertaking or some security. So which one is it that the forestry department would like to have?
This isn't for the tree planting plan. This is just for the securities. And really, we don't have a preference. I mean, this is a standard condition. We use this every time there's work happening within the critical root zone. So there's nothing new here. So we have been able to leave it open and then have discussions with the applicant following the committee's decision about which way they prefer to go. I don't know if you're not comfortable with that, but
I just like to have Ms. Paolini commit one way or the other, so it's on the record.
Well, so I have concerns with either option. But the development agreement, I does say a development agreement is to be registered where applicable, but then it goes on to say the agreement will include the mitigation measures outlined in the tree information report that we submitted. And so that kind of leads me to believe that the development agreement would be imposed.
it's
then-
meant to be open. It's meant to be whichever agreement is that we go forward with. Like the letter of undertaking is also considered an agreement, just a different type. So either way, that would be covered. And
Okay.
it would only be registered on title if it is a development agreement.
All right, but then looking at the letter of undertaking where we are talking about the securities, we don't have any indication of what that amount, what that expected amount would be. And we don't know if there's an estimated value that you can provide us, or like that's just kind of an unknown for us at the moment.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I haven't evaluated the tree yet. It's a standard international method of evaluation that we use. And I mean, we generally do this after the committee approval or committee decision. So I can't unfortunately give you an indication of what that is at this point.
So, Ms. Paolini, do you want to just leave it? That you two? Okay, thank you. Ms. O'Connell, would you like to have a comment?
Yes, I suspect that the flexibility in the condition for a development agreement or a letter of undertaking is to evaluate the fulsome conditions that are before an application. And so in this particular application, there are other conditions that require the use of a development agreement. And so my opinion would be that a development agreement is the appropriate mechanism to include these securities, because we're already requesting a development agreement to address a number of other items. And so it's probably less work, to be honest, for the applicant and for staff if the development agreement is a mechanism to include a number of different conditions. And the reason why I think we include the flexibility for a letter of undertaking is those scenarios where a development agreement is not being requested for any other reason on a particular application, that there may be some efficiency for an applicant in providing that letter of undertaking as opposed to the actual development agreement.
Okay. That good for you?
Yeah, so I understand that development agreement would likely be the, I guess, path of least resistance, but we're happy to kind of keep it open and then just work with planning and forestry on that.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions for the applicant. Mr. Barrett? No. Ms. Wright? No. Ms. McLean? Mr. Baltz? Okay, now I'm moving on to planning, and Elizabeth King, do you have any comments to make with respect to this application?
No comments. I think anything was probably just covered in the previous discussion that we just had, but if you guys have any questions, happy to answer them.
Okay. Mr. Barrett, any questions? For planning?
Yes, I'm just, with regards to the number of units that are proposed, to staff, is, with regards to the storage of, garbage and, other things, has that been considered? I know it'll be considered later, but has it been discussed with the applicant?
I will be honest, I didn't really consider the garbage with this, but from what I understand, it is a single detached dwelling. I'm not sure if the applicant might be a bit better to answer that question if that was considered with the development.
Ms. Paolini?
It was considered, I believe garbage will be stored in the rear yard, but because it's not a zoning requirement, it has not been officially listed anywhere on the plan. But yeah, it has been thought about.
Ms. Wright? Ms. McLean? Mr. Baltz? No? Okay. So now we'd like to move to the public. Is there anyone in-house or online that would like to speak to this application? I believe we have the City View Community Association. All three, is he one of three or all three? Nancy Wilson, Jill Prott, and Wendy Davidson. Are you available?
This is Nancy Wilson. Jill was going to take this today. I don't know if she's having a problem getting on or not. Jill? Okay, I will read this then. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee. My name is Nancy Wilson. In order to be approved by the Committee of Adjustments, all of the 4 tests must be met. The City View Ryan Farm Community Association opposes any application that does not meet the requirements of the existing bylaw. This proposed development at 9 Granton does not meet these requirements. Until the new zoning bylaws are completed and passed at the end of 2025, the R1 FF zoning is effective. Therefore, the requested variances to facilitate the development of these new detached dwellings on undersized lots do not meet the general intent and purpose of the existing zoning bylaw. Also, this proposal is not desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building or structure. This proposal has a driveway leading to 4 parking spaces in the rear yard. This will more than double, even triple, the amount of hard or impermeable surfaces in a neighborhood that has documented flooding issues and no storm sewers. Also, over 1,500 homes in City View have been constructed with driveways in the front or sides of their properties. This does not fit with the existing streetscape or the character of the neighborhood. Rear yard parking. The city passed a new bylaw last October to meet Bill 23 provisions, which included a clause to allow rear yard parking. It is said to be an interim measure until the new bylaws are adopted. As supported by our councillor, this bylaw is not appropriate for our community. Not all communities are the same in regards to parking and should not be treated the same. This bylaw claims that no more than 70% of the rear yard area may be occupied by parking spaces and driveways and the aisles accessing parking. Recent discussions with the city planner revealed that this change was not intended to allow rear yard parking where it was previously prohibited. It was intended to protect some soft landscaping in areas where rear parking was previously allowed. Drainage, the planning report for 9 Granton says the City View neighborhood has known drainage issues as a result of a lack of storm sewer infrastructure and ditches being modified over time. The proposed development would result in significant increases in lot coverage with the potential to worsen the existing situation if no additional stormwater management measures are pursued. Therefore, it is requested that this minor variance approval be subject to stormwater management conditions to address on-site stormwater management. A previous recent planner's report for 7 Starwood noted that the proposed rear yard parking will result in the majority of each lot being paved, greatly reducing the permeable portion of the site for stormwater infiltration. This comment for 7 Starwood applies equally to this development at 9 Granton. Why has this comment not been included in the planner's report? The applicant claims that the project's civil engineer has reviewed the existing drainage of the subject site and has no concerns with the proposed development. In this case, there is currently 1 small culvert under the western driveway and no ditches along the street frontage. We hope that if this is approved, a proper ditch and culvert will be installed along with the other measures to help maintain the integrity of the rural drainage ditch system. Other infrastructure, the level of infrastructure also affects other infrastructure. Or intensification also affects other infrastructure. Many residents on Granton are experiencing reduced water pressure due to the extensive densification targeted for this street. The official plan recognizes that where areas are intensified, other infrastructure, such as parkland, sidewalks, school capacity, traffic, walkability, require updating and improvements. Yet here in City View, there is virtually no parks, no sidewalks, overcapacity schools outside of City View, and major traffic issues, particularly on the surrounding major roads of Clyde, Maribel, and Baseline. Before any more density is added, here we need the promised updating and improvements to support all of this additional population. Other communities are being improved. Why not City View? Thank you. But I'd also just like to make another comment about the trees. The tree retention. Nancy Young said that the development agreement is a stronger way of making sure that these things are done. Why are we iffing and hedging about which one we should use? Like, use the strongest one so that these things are retained, because we see the trees here that are supposed to be saved all the time getting piled with dirt, not looked after during the construction, and they need to have a way of making sure that this is done. So use the strongest method that you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Does anybody have any questions in the panel? Mr. Barrett for Ms. Wilson? No. Ms. Wright? No. Ms. McLean? Mr. Baltz?
Just a quick question. So I'm confused about the rear yard parking. Is it the contention of the City View Community Association that the R1FF zoning does not allow rear yard parking? There seemed to be some part of the statement there that was implying that rear yard parking wasn't permitted. Are they still online, by the way?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay.
We've never had rear yard parking in City View. As much as the developers like to tell us that we have, because some of the older houses had garages set off to the side and the cars drove back to the garage, they consider that rear yard parking. But we don't have rear yard parking in City View. We never have. And this new bylaw, that interim bylaw that was supposed to protect green space, is being used to put backyard parking in an area that's never had backyard parking before. So no, we have never had backyard parking here.
But your zoning permits rear yard parking.
The R1 zoning, I don't know. Maybe the planner can tell us that. I don't know if it's the same across the city for everybody, or whether they look at individual neighborhoods, which they should be looking at for the character.
It would be your subzone that would tell you that. The R1FF subzone permits rear yard parking?
Yes, that is sorry, bit of feedback there. So it is the R1FF zone, and I'm not seeing anything that prohibits rear yard parking. I'm just going through my zoning bylaw, but I'm not seeing anything that would prohibit, rear yard parking. Likely the only other option for parking would be, and I'll defer to the applicant for this, would be to do, I believe, like an attached garage, and then you'd have 2 driveways. I think that would be the only alternative, just based on the design proposal that we're looking at. We're not really sure what the interim bylaw is.
I believe that the delegation is referring to the bylaw that restricts hard surfacing to 70% of rear yards and requires, 1.5 meters of buffer at the back. I think that's what they're referring to, but that's meant to be on top of provisions where rear yard parking is already permitted, not to add new. So I think the situation we have here is that rear yard parking is permitted, and the evidence before us is not that we can prohibit it.
I think the bylaw is 2023-435, and that's the interim one that the planner told us that they put that in to preserve backyards, to preserve green space. So what that bylaw has done has opened it up for the developers now to put in backyard parking where we never had backyard parking before. We've never in this neighborhood had backyard parking. So maybe it was allowed before, but because of the character of the neighborhood, because of the way the neighborhood is set up, because we have garages in the front and driveways in the front everywhere. Now, because this bylaw has come out, the developers are looking at it and saying, oh, well, we can put this in the backyard. So with these new houses that have 3 units on each side, there's no garage in the front because there's no room for it. So they don't have garages anymore. So they put a drive down the center and then put backyard parking into the back. And it's affecting our neighborhood greatly. We've had people, this is, I think, the 4th time that it's happened in our neighborhood. We've had people that in the last 2 places that have moved. They've sold their house behind and moved because they don't want to have backyard parking, cars running while their kids are out in the backyards playing. We don't have parks here. We don't have places to walk here. Our backyards are our haven. The backyards are where we go to find some peace in our life. But now you go out to your backyard and there's cars parked there that are starting up or coming in, or hard surfaces and garbage thrown out in the back, like they said they're going to put the garbage out back, and snow piled up in the wintertime because it's got to be pushed up against our properties, and flooding caused because of that in the summer. So that's why we are so opposed to the backyard parking. And whether it was allowed or not before, it's never been here in City View. Thank you.
I think we're moving beyond what we can do here, but it might be worth having a conversation either with the planning department or your counselor's office, because it sounds like it's not an issue of this new bylaw. It has to do with your underlying zoning, and you may want to discuss that now that a new zoning bylaw is being developed.
Yes, thank you. We have done that and we will continue. Thanks.
Ms. Wilson, is Ms. Pratt or Ms. Davidson available, or are they left up to you today?
Well, Ms. Davidson is not here, but Ms. Pratt was supposed to be here and maybe she couldn't get on. I wasn't supposed to be here today, but I'm here. So I don't think she's got anything more to say.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Paolini, the last words for you.
Thank you. Just to address, I guess, some of the concerns that have been brought up. I guess I'll start with the rear yard parking. If that's so, it is permitted in this zone, and we are under the maximum 70% hardscaping and over the minimum 15% softscaping. And the purpose of the single driveway down the middle is to replace the existing 2 driveways. The property currently has one double attached garage and one single detached garage, each with their own driveway. And so the total width of the existing hardscaping for those driveways is about 10 meters at its average in width. And so we are proposing to replace that with a single 3-meter shared driveway. And I do know that the single driveway, shared driveway with parking in the back does align with policies in the official plan and other zoning requirements. And regarding the servicing, I do know that drainage has been a concern in this neighborhood, and we have reviewed the Robinson Consulting 2022 study that addresses the Lakeview and City View areas. So myself and the civil engineer on board have reviewed the report as well as the site conditions, and are confident that we can address the drainage concerns, especially in the conditions imposed in the planner's report. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now moving on to item number 5. This item has to do with 841 and 845 Grenon Avenue. I'm looking for James Ireland. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and your address, sir?
James Ireland, and I'm a planner at Novatech.
Great. So can you please give us a brief overview of this application?
Certainly. So I'll split it into 2 sections, but there's 2 minor variances that are part of this application. Starting maybe with the section 139 relief that we need. So this is for the relationship between the garage door and the pedestrian entry to the building. For this, it's mostly a matter of timing. We're not asking for forgiveness for this. It's, yes, the building is under construction, almost complete, but the way it came about was that through the site plan revision application to the city planning department for the additional 2 units, they picked up that it needed to comply with section 139, which came in October 14th, 2020. I confirmed that with city staff. That was after we applied for site plan. It was actually before the building permit was issued, which was issued in 2023. So I guess there's been an oversight, but by the building department, I assume, but we're trying to bring things into line with the site plan approval that we got in 2020. There's been no change in this aspect of the design since then. The building has always been designed like this, with the garage in line with the front door, but in line with the front of the porch. That's an option you can count, but behind the garage. That's the one where, that's that one. That was added as a minor variance, but we initially applied just for the parking, and then this was added because of the discussions with the city planning department. The impact is minor. As I said, the front porch entry cover is actually in line with the garage. The nature of the building being a low-rise apartment building, the impact is perhaps less than it would be in a regular ground-oriented dwelling. The garage door is not, I don't believe, overly prominent, and the pedestrian entry is clear, identifiable, and part of the reason that the entry door is further back is because it has this porch providing weather protection for people coming in. Consistent with the zoning and official plan, this is an approved low-rise apartment building, so it's facilitating the development of that. The second minor variance is for the parking, and this is because 2 additional apartments are being applied for. Within the existing envelope of the building, it was an indoor amenity area and a mail room, I believe, on the original plans, but there is sufficient space for two apartments there. So the number of apartments goes from 30 to 32, with no change to the parking spaces provided there as they were. The zoning in place requires 3 visitor parking spaces, and that does not change. So we're not seeking relief from that. We do need to seek relief for the parking rate for residents, which goes from what's currently approved, which is 0.6 spaces per resident or residential unit. And then obviously adding the 2 apartments brings that down very slightly to 0.56. In support of that, the Richmond Road Transit Priority Corridor is about 220 metres away, and Pinecrest Station, currently a bus station, but will be LRT, is about 1.2 kilometres away. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to move on to the panel and see if the panel has any questions for you, sir. Mr. Baltz, do you have any questions for Mr. Ireland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just because we received 2 letters each addressing the garage entrance. So just to be clear, it was approved when the bylaw permitted this configuration of garage entrances originally, correct?
I don't believe that's actually correct.
No.
The dates are very close, but I have October 14 as the council meeting when this part of section 139 applied to this site. And we have a signed DAR from October 27th of the same year. It's about 2 weeks later. It was approved.
So somebody missed a variance.
I
with it.
believe so,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, so in essence, you were deemed to have complied at that time because it was approved,
Exactly.
but they missed that variance. And so now, because you are looking for a separate variance for number of parking spaces, it triggered this technical variance for an as-built condition.
That's a very good summary, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. McLean, do you have any questions? No. Ms. Wright? No. And Mr. Barrett? Questions? Okay. Now moving on to our planning services. Ms. Ankaran, do you have any comments with respect to this application?
Planning staff have no concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Does our panel have any questions? Mr. Baltz? Ms. McLean? Ms. Wright? No. Mr. Barrett? No. Okay. No questions from the panel. I'd like to now ask if there are any members of the public present or online that would like to make a comment or on this application. We have no one in-house or online that'd like to make an application. So Mr. Ireland, I'd like to give the last word to you, sir.
Thank you. This is a development which brings much needed housing to this part of the city, and adding these two apartments, additional apartments is such a simple and quick way to get some more rental housing, of fairly affordable rental housing to the area. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I'd like to ask the panel if they would like to reserve this application. All those in favor of reserving, please raise your hands. Your application will be reserved and you will receive notification of our decision in 10 days, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, panel.
I think that ends our work for today. Thank you all very much for your help, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.